Well, welcome back to the painting of this icon of Monica, mother of Augustine of Hippo. In a little while I'll talk more about Monica and her history. Just to say that in this episode, at the moment I'm putting in the shading using a dilute mix of burnt umber and just putting in the darker shadows, and over the top of that I'll be painting red and blue, mainly red in the first instance, and it's Venetian red, and a lot of this is sort of fairly not boring, but it's pretty repetitive. It's just putting on paint. This outer veil, this hood, will be white, but I am starting with red. It didn't actually work. I'm going to go over this with ultramarine blue, but it was an experiment that didn't come off. I have seen and actually achieved an interesting effect some years ago by having a white garment that has blue shadows, but with red kind of showing through. So I tried that again and it didn't work. So let's hear about Monica, mother of Augustine of Hippo, a faithful servant. And this piece is written by Professor Catherine Masson. Monica, circa 331 to 87, was probably born in Tagaste, in the northern part of Africa that is now Algeria, administered from Carthage as part of the Roman Empire. Most of what we know about her comes from the spiritual autobiography of her eldest son, Augustine of Hippo, circa 354 to 430. As Peter Brown comments, few mothers can survive being presented to us exclusively in terms of what they have come to mean to their sons, much less a son as complicated as Augustine. But Monica emerges as resolute and absolutely steadfast in prayer. She was perceptive and not above some dignified sarcasm, but despised gossip. Augustine presents her as a peacemaker in the community and a woman with deep inner resources. Monica was brought up in a Christian household and through her life kept up devotional traditions of the African church, sometimes dismissed as primitive by the more educated contemporaries, such as fasting in preparation for the Sabbath, graveside meals, the confident interpretation of dreams. She was married to Patricius, a pagan, apparently hot-tempered and violent, who became a Christian catechumen about 369, a few years before his death, when Monica was 40. They had two other children whose names we know, younger than Augustine, a second son, Navigius, and a daughter, Perpetua. Following contemporary practice, Monica enrolled the child Augustine as a catechumen without having him baptized. She was convinced that a good classical education would eventually bring Augustine to Christian faith, but was anxious enough about his lifestyle to follow him to Italy in 383, first to Rome and then to Milan. Like Augustine, she was influenced by Ambrose, Bishop of Milan, and Augustine presents her views in two dialogues written in 389, De Ordine and De Beata Vita. Gary Wills suggests that Augustine came to appreciate his mother later in life, realising not only her piety but now also her theological insight. Monica saw Augustine baptized in 387 and set out with him to return to Africa later that year. They had travelled as far as Ostia on the Italian mainland when she caught a fever and died. A little sideline, I have visited Ostia Antica. It was the port of Rome, and you can still visit it. It's not on the coast anymore because it's of the alluvium that has been spread into onto the coastline. But it is a really interesting place to visit. A simple train trip from Rome. Don't miss it if you're there. Recording her final days in Confessions, Augustine stressed Monica's faith and quiet contentment. He also recounted a conversation between them, reclining by ourselves at a window which looked out onto the inner garden of the house, that prompted a shared mystical experience of God as the ageless wisdom that outlasts all things else. From conversation, recalling past events, musing about the truth which you, God, are, and wondering what the eternal life of the saints would be like, they caught up so that their hearts were thirsting for the streams that flow from that fountain of life which is in you. That's from Confessions 9:25. The remarkable experience was almost beyond words for Augustine, and of course not recorded at all by Monica, but it has become a touchstone for showing how community and companionship can lift individuals towards God. Now, as you can see, the red that I had on the outer hood gun this white, titanium white, which is being laid on now, is what will become the colour for this outer garment. It's ultramarine blue underneath. The red that was underneath that is totally obliterated, so that was a failure. But this will work okay. We must have a dark colour underneath a white garment, and this will be quite, I hope, quite striking, as this deep blue as the shadow in this white titanium garment. And I'm using the number 3 Kolinsky brush for some of the larger sections of putting on the blocking in the main colours. I was using a 14 flat brush. As you could see, it took a number of coats, but I put on just enough coats so that I can still see the shading, particularly the main shadow lines that were placed, that were painted on in the first place. And that was a bit of a pity to not adjust the camera so that we could see what was happening up there. However, later on I think probably I will have seen the error of my ways and give us a good view of that. Now, in the next episode, I will spend time showing the rest of the highlights, particularly in the 2 undergarments, before we start on other aspects like the scroll, and there's a cross still to happen too.